The silence within the grand synod of the Arthurian hegemony was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a crushing pressure that seemed to press the very air from the lungs of the 300 high exarchs gathered within the obsidian spire. For 10,000 cycles, this chamber had been the beating heart of a galaxy-spanning empire, a place where the fates of stars were decided with the sterile calculation of a mathematics equation. Here, the Arthurian elite, tall and slender beings with skin like polished basalt and eyes that glowed with the bioluminescence of their deep-world heritage, had orchestrated the subjugation of 100 lesser species. They were the architects of order, the silent gardeners of the void, believing themselves to be the apex of evolution, the final answer to the chaotic equation of life. But today, the silence was different. It was not the reverent silence of power, but the brittle, suffocating silence of fear. In the center of the vast, circular amphitheater, a holographic projection flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the high-vaulted ceiling that was carved from the bones of the planet's crust. The image was grainy, distorted by the violent radiation of a skirmish that had defied all logic, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a ship, but to call it a ship was to insult the magnitude of what hovered in the projection. It was a monolith, a slab of matte gray geometry that seemed to absorb the starlight around it, void of the elegant curves and energy sails that defined Arthurian aesthetics. It was ugly, it was brutish, and it was terrifyingly, impossibly intact. High Exarch Valen, the supreme commander of the Third Armada and the most decorated strategist in the history of the hegemony, stood at the podium, his gripping claws digging into the stone lectern until dust trickled down to the floor. He was a being composed of discipline and rigid certainty, yet the tremors in his hands were visible to those in the front rows. He stared at the projection, his mandibles tight against his faceplates, refusing to speak until the weight of the image had fully settled upon the minds of the council. The report had come in 3 standard hours ago from the fringe sector, a region of space designated as a worthless dust cloud, a place where only pirates and fools ventured. A patrol squadron, consisting of 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen interceptors, the pride of the hegemony's rapid response doctrine, had encountered an unknown vessel drifting near a nebular nursery. Following standard protocol, the squadron leader had issued the Edict of Submission. When the vessel did not respond, they had fired warning shots. When the vessel still did not respond, they had fired to disable. And when the vessel had simply continued its slow, inexorable drift, ignoring the plasma torrents washing over its hull like rain over a mountain, the squadron leader had panicked. He had ordered a full-force bombardment, unleashing antimatter torpedoes capable of cracking the crust of a moon. The recording played the moment of impact. The blinding white flash of the detonation washed out the sensors, and the council chamber was bathed in a stark, harsh light. When the sensors cleared, the gasps from the exarchs were audible. The gray ship was untouched. It had not raised a shield. It had not maneuvered. It had simply taken the fire, the energy dissipating across its hull in rippling waves of heat, absorbed into the material as if the ship itself were feeding on the aggression. And then the message had come. "This is the recording," Valen said, his voice a low grind of gravel and authority, though stripped of its usual bravado. "It was transmitted on all frequencies, bypassing our encryption keys as if they did not exist. It was not a plea for mercy. It was not a declaration of war. It was a correction." He gestured, and the audio played. The voice that filled the chamber was synthesized, flat, and devoid of biological inflection, yet it carried a weight of weariness that transcended language. It spoke in High Arthurian, a dialect dead for 4,000 years, known only to the scholar priests. "Your energy output is inefficient. You are damaging the nebular nursery. Cease fire or you will disrupt the gestation of the stars." That was it. No threats, no identification, just a reprimand like a teacher scolding a child for playing with fire in a library. The squadron leader, humiliated and terrified by the indifference of the Leviathan, had ordered a suicide run, ramming his flagship into the midsection of the gray vessel. The hologram shifted to show the aftermath. The Arthurian cruiser, a masterpiece of art and war, had crumpled against the gray hull like tin foil against a diamond. It hadn't even scratched the paint. The alien vessel had then accelerated, not with engines, but with a manipulation of gravity so profound that it warped the light of the background stars, vanish. Into the fold of space, without a warp signature the hegemony could track. "They call themselves humans," Valen continued, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "Our deep-range listening posts have been intercepting their scatter for cycles, dismissing it as background noise from a primitive, chaotic species. We believed them to be confined to a single rock, squabbling over resources, unable to escape their own gravity well without killing themselves. We were wrong. We were catastrophically wrong. A murmur of dissent rose from the scholar caste seating. Scholar Priestess Lyra, her robes shimmering with the iridescent weaves of the archives, stood up. She was younger than Valen, her eyes bright with a curiosity that the military caste found dangerous. You speak of them as monsters, Exarch. She projected, her voice calm and melodic, cutting through the low hum of fear. But the evidence suggests otherwise. They did not return fire. They absorbed an antimatter bombardment, and their only concern was for the stars nearby. This implies a stewardship of the cosmos that predates our own philosophy of the garden. If they were conquerors, our squadron would be dust. Instead, they are merely broken, victims of their own aggression against an immovable object. Valen turned his burning gaze upon her. Passive resistance is a tactic of the weak, scholar, but this was not resistance. This was contempt. They did not fight back because they did not consider us a threat worthy of the effort. And that, Valen slammed his fist onto the podium, the sound cracking like a thunderclap, is the greatest threat the hegemony has ever faced. If they do not fear our weapons, they do not respect our law. And if they do not respect our law, they will dismantle everything we have built, not with war, but with their mere existence. We must find them. We must scour the fringe. And we must bring every weapon in the Grand Fleet to bear upon them until we find a limit to their endurance. The debate raged for hours, the chamber becoming a cauldron of conflicting ideologies. The militarists demanded a preemptive crusade, arguing that a species capable of ignoring antimatter was a predator in waiting. The scholars argued for diplomacy, sensing a depth of knowledge in the human indifference that could elevate the hegemony to new heights. The political caste, terrified of losing their grip on the subject systems if news of the invincible ship spread, sought a middle ground of containment and suppression. But the debate was cut short not by a gavel, but by a siren. It was the planetary defense alarm. The sound, a low-frequency thrum that vibrated the very marrow of their bones, had not sounded on Othries Prime for 3,000 years. The holographic map in the center of the room dissolved, replaced by a live feed from the orbital sensory grid. The atmosphere in the room shifted from debate to frozen horror instantly. There, hanging in the high orbit of the capital world, dwarfing the orbital shipyards and casting a shadow that plunged the continent of Ethelgard into twilight, was the ship. It had bypassed the sensor net. It had bypassed the defensive fleets. It had simply appeared, a ghost manifesting in the center of the fortress. It was vast, kilometers long, a brutalist slab of metal and ceramic that looked less like a vehicle and more like a shard of a dead planet given engines. It hung there, silent, motionless, its weapons ports closed, its engines cold. The hegemony's fleet, thousands of sleek golden warships, swarmed around it like insects around a sleeping dragon, their weapons locked, their commanders screaming for orders. But no order came. The council was paralyzed. To fire in high orbit would be to rain debris upon the holy cities below. To do nothing was to surrender. "They have come to finish it," Valen whispered, his face gray. "They tracked the survivor. They have come to decapitate the Empire." He looked up at the ceiling, as if expecting the roof to tear open and fire to rain down. "Activate the god spears," he ordered, his voice trembling. "Target the vessel's drive core. If we burn the sky, so be it." But before the command could be relayed, the communications grid of the entire planet seized. Every screen, every datapad, every holographic interface in the council chamber went black, then flared with a simple white text in the hegemony's own script. It was not a virus. The systems were not attacked. They were simply overridden by a signal strength so massive it drowned out all other electronic activity. The text was simple, requesting audience. The audacity of it struck the council dumb. A species that could park a Leviathan over the capital without detection, that could weather antimatter fire, was asking for permission to speak. "Grant it," Lyra said, her voice the only sound in the dead room. Valen looked at her, his eyes wide with panic and rage, but he saw the logic. They had no choice. "Let the speak," Valen conceded, slumping against the podium. "But keep the weapons locked. If they make one move, one aggressive fluctuation, we fire everything." The main screen flickered, and the static cleared to reveal a bridge. It was not the sleek, glowing command deck of an Othrisian warship. It was dark, illuminated by the harsh, utilitarian glow of amber tactical displays. Cables hung from the ceiling in disorganized bundles. The crew, bipeds with soft, unarmored skin and tufts of fur on their heads, moved with a chaotic efficiency, shouting across the room, drinking from mugs, looking exhausted. In the center, sitting in a chair that looked physically uncomfortable, was a human. She was old, her hair the color of steel, her face lined with the geography of stress and time. She wore a uniform of dark blue, unadorned save for a single gold bar on her collar. She looked at the camera, her eyes dark and heavy, and she did not bow. She did not perform the ritual of greeting. She simply leaned forward, clasping her hands. "I am Admiral Alina Vance of the United Terran Coalition vessel Hephaestus," she said, her voice translated in real time by the universal interface. "We apologize for the intrusion. We apologize for the damage to your cruiser in the fringe. We tried to move, but your pilot was enthusiastic." She paused, looking down at a data pad. "We are not here to fight you. We are not here to conquer you. We are strictly passing through. We detected a gravimetric anomaly in your sector that matches the signature of a threat we have been tracking for 3 centuries. We need to calibrate our sensors using your star's output to confirm the trajectory. We request 24 standard hours of orbit, and then we will leave." The council stared. A threat. They were the threat. The arrogance was blinding. "You violate our sovereign space," Valen barked, finding his voice. "You destroy or allow to be destroyed our naval assets. And you claim to be tracking a threat? We are the hegemony of Othries. We hold the keys to the quadrant. There is no threat here that we do not control." Admiral Vance looked at Valen through the screen, and for a moment a flicker of pity crossed her face. It was an expression Valen had never directed at himself, and to see it from an alien made his blood boil. "High Exarch," she said softly, "with all due respect to your empire. You are standing in the middle of a burning room and you do not smell the smoke yet. We are not the ones you should be afraid of. We are the firebreak." She tapped a console. "We are sending a shuttle. I invite a delegation to come aboard. Bring your sensors, bring your scientists, bring your warriors if it makes you feel safer. We will show you what we are tracking. And then you will understand why we built this ship the way we did. It wasn't built to fight you. It was built to survive what comes after." The shuttle ride up to the Hephaestus was a silent journey of dread. Valen, Lyra, and a guard of 4 Praetorians, elite warriors in powered exoskeletons, sat in the belly of the human transport. The shuttle itself was a brick, functional and ugly, vibrating with the raw power of its engines. When they docked with the massive ship, they expected to be met by legions of soldiers, by walls of guns. Instead, the airlock cycled open to reveal a hangar bay that smelled of ozone and machine oil. A young human male in a jumpsuit, holding a clipboard, waved them forward. "Welcome aboard," he said, barely looking up. "Mind the grav plating on deck 4, it's a bit twitchy. Admiral S waiting in the observation deck." They walked through the corridors of the human ship, and the scale of it began to dawn on them. It wasn't just a ship. It was a city. They passed vast hydroponic bays where plants from 1,000 worlds grew in simulated sunlight. They passed schools where human children learned mathematics and art. They passed manufacturing plants where drones were assembling components of incomprehensible complexity. "This is not a warship," Lyra whispered, her hand trailing along the bulkhead, sensing the vibrations of the machine spirit. "It is an ark. They are not an expeditionary force. They are a migration." Valen scoffed, keeping his hand on his plasma caster. "A migration with armor thick enough to ignore antimatter. No, this is a fortress. They are hiding something." They reached the observation deck, a vast dome of transparent aluminum looking out over the curve of Othries Prime. Admiral Vance stood there, looking down at the planet. She turned as they entered, her hands clasped behind her back. "It's a beautiful world," she said. "We had one like it once, before the silence found us." "The silence?" Lyra asked, stepping forward. "Our texts speak of the great silence, the reason why the galaxy is empty. We believe it is the natural order, that civilizations rise and fall in isolation." Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It's not natural, and it's not empty. It's been harvested." She walked to a central console and keyed in a command. The room darkened, and a hologram sprang to life. It showed the galaxy spinning slowly, but there were patches of darkness spreading like a cancer, areas where stars were simply gone, not exploded, not collapsed, but erased. "We call them the entropy swarm," Vance said. "Or simply the eaters. They don't want planets. They don't want resources. They feed on complexity. They feed on information. Advanced civilizations are like beacons to them. The louder you transmit, the faster they come." She zoomed in on a sector of space near the Othrisian border. "You've been expanding hegemony. Your subspace relays are screaming into the void. You are shouting here is food to the dark. We detected a scout tendril of the swarm moving toward your system. That is why we are here. We are not here to invade. We are here to build a wall." Valen stared at the map. "Lies. If such a thing existed, our ancestors would have recorded it." "Your ancestors survived because they were quiet," Vance snapped, her calm veneer cracking for a second to reveal the steel beneath. You became loud, and now they are coming. She gestured to the window, to the massive bulk of the ship around them. You asked why we don't fight you, why we didn't fire back, because every gigajoule of energy we waste on you is energy we don't have to hold the line against them. This ship, the Hephaestus, it isn't just a ship, it's a gravity anchor. We are going to deploy a singularity shield around your system. It will mask your emissions. It will hide you. But we need your grid to shut down. We need you to stop broadcasting. Total silence. If you fight us, if you fire your god spears, the energy spike will draw the swarm in before we can set the trap. The revelation hung in the air. The Othrisian worldview, built on the idea that they were the masters of war, crumbled. They were not the hunters. They were the noisy prey, and the humans were the weary game wardens trying to cover their tracks. Show us, Valen demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier fire. Show us the enemy. Vance nodded. We have a specimen, a drone we captured a century ago. It's in containment, Deck 0. The journey to Deck 0 was a descent into hell. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer. The ship's hum changed from a steady thrum to a low, dissonant vibration that made Lyra's teeth ache. The walls here were reinforced with strange, glowing runes, technology that looked like a fusion of science and superstition. The swarm operates on physics we barely understand, Vance explained as they walked. They weaponize despair. They broadcast a signal that degrades synaptic pathways. We have to keep the drone in a stasis field generated by the minds of psychically attuned navigators. It's the only thing that holds it. They reached a massive blast door. It hissed open to reveal a chamber suspended in a magnetic field. In the center, floating in a bubble of distorted light, was a shadow. It had no fixed shape. It shifted and roiled, a cloud of absolute darkness that seemed to cut a hole in reality. Just looking at it made Valen feel a nausea so profound he nearly fell. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to weep, to give up, to lie down and die. It's beautiful, Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her face, her mind fracturing under the mimetic pressure. It's the end of all things. Look away, Vance shouted, grabbing Lyra and spinning her around. Do not focus on it, it feeds on observation. The humans in the room, technicians wearing heavy lead-lined helmets, were working frantically at consoles, their hands moving in a blur. This is a scout, Vance hissed. One single drone. It destroyed 3 of our colonies before we managed to trap it, and there are billions of them on the way to your border. Valen looked at the creature, forcing his military discipline to hold his mind together. He saw the truth then. The humans were not weak. They were holding back a tide of nightmares. Their pacifism was a necessity of focus. They were the shield-bearers of the galaxy, battered and scarred, moving from system to system, trying to save arrogant empires from their own noise. The dangerous ship, Valen muttered. The message. Flee the dangerous ship. What? Vance asked. The title of the report I was going to file, Valen said, his voice distant. I was going to call your vessel the dangerous ship, but I was wrong. The danger is not the ship. The danger is what you carry. The danger is the truth. Suddenly, the alarms on the Hephaestus screamed, a sound different from the battle alarms. It was a high-pitched, wailing shriek. The containment field around the shadow drone flickered. Stability failure, a technician screamed. The proximity of the Othrisian fleet, their active scanners are resonating with the entity. It's waking up. Vance's face went pale. You scanned it. She yelled at Valen. Did you have active scanners running? Valen froze, his armor. His suit had automatic tactical telemetry. It had been pinging the room since he entered. It is standard protocol. You fool, Vance shoved him toward the door. Evacuate, get to your shuttle, the resonance is breaking the stasis. The shadow in the center of the room expanded. It didn't explode, it unfolded. Tendrils of black smoke lashed out, passing through the magnetic barriers as if they were smoke. Where the tendrils touched the metal floor, the metal turned to gray dust. Where they touched a technician, the man simply ceased to exist, vanishing into the void. Run, Vance commanded, hitting a master override on the wall. I'm initiating the emergency jettison. We're dumping the containment module into the sun. Get off my ship. The run back to the shuttle was a blur of chaos. The Hephaestus was shuddering, the gravity plating fluctuating wildly. Valen and Lyra scrambled into their transport, the Praetorians practically throwing them into the seats. As the shuttle detached and screamed away from the massive gray hull, they watched through the rear viewport. The bottom section of the human ship, a block of metal the size of a city, detached. It was glowing with a sickly purple light. The shadow entity was eating it from the inside out. The Hephaestus fired its main engines, not to escape, but to push the jettisoned module harder toward the Othrisian sun. They are sacrificing a third of their ship, Lyra gasped, to save us from our own mistake. The module hit the upper atmosphere of the star. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sun flared. It wasn't a normal solar flare. It was a scream of light, a pulse of energy that turned the void white. The shadow entity shrieked psychically, a sound that every being in the Othri system heard in their minds, a sound of frustration and hunger denied. And then it was gone, burned away by the fusion fire of the star. The Hephaestus hung in orbit, wounded, its lower deck a ragged scar of torn metal and sparking cables. The silence returned to the system, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of awe. Valen stood in the council chamber hours later. The mood was somber. The arrogance was gone. The image of the wounded human ship was still on the main screen. They had not fled. They had stayed to ensure the entity was destroyed. A message had been received from Admiral Vance. It was brief. Containment breach resolved. We have lost containment capability for future captures. We cannot stay. We must return to the void line to repair. We are leaving you the coordinates for the shielding array. Build it, stop broadcasting, be quiet. We will try to hold them back, but we cannot be everywhere. You are not alone, but you are in a dark forest. Do not light a fire. The transmission ended. The massive gray ship, missing its bottom third, slowly turned. The gravity drive engaged, warping the light, and it vanished, slipping back into the deep dark between the stars. Valen looked at the assembled exarchs. He looked at Lyra, who was clutching a datapad containing the schematics for the shield. "We thought we were the Empire," Valen said, his voice ringing with a new, terrifying clarity. "We thought we were the masters of the galaxy." He looked at his hands, the hands that had almost doomed his world by scanning a nightmare. "We are children," he said. "Children playing in the mud while the adults hold back the wolves." He looked up, his eyes burning with a new resolve. "Build the shield," he ordered. "Silence the relays, ground the fleets, we will do as they say." "And then," an exarch asked from the back, "what do we do in the silence?" Valen looked at the empty space where the human ship had been. He thought of the weary look in Vance's eyes, the weight of a species that had chosen to be the jailers of hell rather than its victims. "Then," Valen said, "we grow up, we learn, and we prepare. Because one day the shield will break, and when it does, the humans will need more than our silence. They will need our swords." The Othrisian Empire did not end that day, but the Empire of Arrogance died. In the years that followed, the hegemony became the Silent Keepers. They built the shield, they watched the stars, and they waited for the day they would be worthy to stand beside the gray ships in the dark. The war ended with a single message, and they had fled the dangerous truth of their own insignificance, only to find a new purpose in the shadow of the human example. They were no longer the conquerors, they were the reserves. And they would be ready.